My name is Vivienne. That's not the name on my birth certificate, but it's the name that carried me through the chapters of my life where survival and reinvention were the only things that mattered. I was born just outside Paris, in a small suburb that looked calm on the outside but was full of contradictions on the inside. My mother was Hungarian, first generation in France, a strong, ambitious woman who believed in education, structure, and discipline. She was my role model, my safety net, my constant. My father was the opposite. A musician, a dreamer, a man obsessed with America, freedom, and opportunities, but also with no sense of limits. He had this way of showing up in bursts, then disappearing, like a clock that kept ticking but never stayed in rhythm. I grew up with a twin sister, and that's where one of my first battles began. Being a twin means you're never just you. You're always compared, measured, evaluated against the other half. My sister was mellow, calm, soft-spoken, the one who followed the rules. I was the firecracker, hyper, restless, always asking too many questions, running too fast, trying too hard. My parents constantly compared me to her. Why can't you be like your sister? And that comparison cut deeper than they realized. I loved her. She was part of me. But living in her shadow created a wound that never fully healed. My father encouraged freedom, sometimes to a dangerous degree. He gave us scooters at an age where kids should have been home before sunset, and he let us ride until late into the night. My mother, terrified, tried to hold the reins tighter, to balance the chaos my father brought. So my childhood was a pendulum swinging between extreme safety and extreme risk. At school, I was both brilliant and disruptive. If I was interested in a subject, I excelled. If not, I crashed hard. Languages, history, literature, I thrived. Math? Equations felt like prison bars. My mother, determined that I wouldn't fail, enrolled me in a private school surrounded by wealthy kids. That environment opened my eyes, but not in the way she expected. The rich kids had everything: cars, gadgets, clothes.
So I took buses to Amsterdam with my boyfriend at the time. A simple weekend trip for others, but for me, it was a business venture. I'd load up on different kinds of weed, bring them back, and suddenly I had something no one else did. My monopoly stretched for miles. People would travel just to buy from me. At 17, I thought I was invincible. 32 trips in 2 years, slipping across borders in the night, convinced that the universe was on my side. Of course, the universe always finds a way to balance things out. My mother found kilos of weed hidden in my room. That discovery didn't just end my little empire, it shifted my entire path. Furious, desperate to save me, she sent me back to America, the land where I was technically born but barely knew, Santa Cruz, California. She thought it would straighten me out. Instead, it introduced me to a whole new world of temptation. But before that, I need to pause and say something about my mom. She wasn't perfect, but she was determined. She carried a kind of magic, a resilience that I only understood years later. She's the reason I didn't spiral completely off track when things got dark. She believed in me when even I didn't. And in her own way, by sending me across the ocean, she planted the seed for everything that came next. The good, the bad, the painful, the extraordinary. By 19, I was thousands of miles away from Paris, walking into smoke shops in California, trying to figure out who I was. I didn't know it then, but I was standing at the edge of a cliff, and the choices I made in those years would push me over, straight into a life I never imagined, one that would carry me into both destruction and rebirth. This was the beginning of Vivienne. Not the obedient daughter, not the restless twin, not the bad girl, but the woman who would learn that life offers you doors you never expect, and once you open them, you can't pretend you never saw what's inside. Santa Cruz was supposed to be my fresh start. My mother thought distance would save me, that the ocean could wash away the chaos inside me. But the truth is,
You don't outrun yourself. You just pack your restlessness into a suitcase and unpack it in a new city. I was 19, working at a smoke shop. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady money. I rang up glass pipes, rolling papers, and cheap lighters for college kids with wide eyes and fake IDs. To most people, I was just another clerk behind the counter. But inside, I was buzzing with the same hunger I'd felt in Paris. The hunger for something more. That's when fate, or chaos, stepped in. A friend invited me to what she called a pleasure party. I didn't know exactly what that meant, but I was curious. I've always been curious. Curiosity is a blessing and a curse. It opens doors you didn't even know existed, but once you step through, you can't go back. The night of the party, I remember the nerves buzzing under my skin. I wore something simple, nothing special, because I didn't know what to expect. When we walked in, I froze. The room was filled with people who carried themselves differently. Confident, free. Like the rules of the outside world didn't apply in here. At first, I hovered on the edges, clutching a drink, laughing too loud, pretending I was fine. Then a man approached me. He was older, maybe in his 40s, with this calm presence that instantly disarmed me. He asked simple questions, where I was from, what I did for work. Nothing invasive. And then, like it was the most casual thing in the world, he said, "You're beautiful. I'd like to spend more time with you, and I'll pay you for it." It was such a jarring moment. Not insulting, not sleazy, just direct. The air shifted around me. My heart pounded. Half of me wanted to laugh, to walk away. The other half whispered, "Listen." That night, I said yes. Not because I needed the money, I was surviving fine. Not because I was desperate, but because something in me was curious about what it meant, what it felt like, where it could lead. The money shocked me. From that night on, the idea wouldn't leave my mind. The man's words echoed in my head, the confidence with which he offered me not just attention, but value. It was intoxicating. I thought, if one person is willing to pay this much, what about others? Soon, opportunities multiplied. Friends introduced me to new circles. I learned the unspoken codes, discretion, boundaries, presentation. I realized quickly that this world wasn't just about desire. It was about psychology, control, and survival. And then, one evening, someone mentioned a place in Nevada, a place that would change everything, the BunnyRanch. At the time, I didn't fully understand what it was. I imagined it like something out of a movie, glamorous, a little dangerous, but legitimate. A legal brothel, hidden in plain sight, with women who weren't just surviving, but thriving. The idea burned in my brain. It wasn't long before I found myself on a bus, crossing into Nevada with a small suitcase and a mix of terror and exhilaration in my chest. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't tell my sister. I just went. Because deep down, I already knew. I had opened a door that could never be closed, and I wasn't walking through it by accident. I was running. When I first saw the BunnyRanch, it looked nothing like what I had imagined. From the outside, it could have been any roadside inn. Neon lights glowed against the desert sky, buzzing faintly, promising both mystery and danger. My heart pounded as I walked through the doors, suitcase in hand. Inside, the air was thick with perfume and nervous energy. Women laughed in clusters, their heels clicking against the tiled floor, their dresses shimmering under soft lights. Some looked glamorous, untouchable. Others seemed tired, their eyes scanning the room like they'd seen this scene play out 100 times before. I was 20, still naive,
but stubborn enough to believe I could handle anything. They sat me down, explained the rules. Licensing, health checks, scheduling. It was all professional, almost clinical. That part surprised me. This wasn't chaos, it was organized, regulated, businesslike. But underneath the paperwork and the protocol, there was something raw, something unspoken. The first night I worked, I was terrified. I had learned the basics. Always negotiate up front, set your boundaries, never promise what you can't deliver. The parlor filled with men, some drunk, some shy, some trying to act like they belonged there. When the bell rang, it was like a casting call. We lined up, smiles plastered on our faces, waiting to be chosen. And then it happened. A man pointed at me. Just like that, my fate for the night was sealed. My legs shook as I walked him back to a room. Every step felt heavier than the last. But once the door closed, something inside me shifted. I realized this wasn't just about appearances or transactions. It was about control. About learning how to read someone's body language, how to steer a conversation, how to maintain power even in vulnerability. That first client wasn't cruel, wasn't dangerous. He was awkward, lonely, a man who wanted to feel seen. And as strange as it sounds, that gave me a sense of purpose. I understood that part of my role wasn't only physical, it was psychological, emotional, spiritual even. The money was shocking again, more than I'd ever dreamed of. I held it in my hands, the weight of it pressing into my palms, and I knew I wasn't going back to the smoke shop. This was a new world, and I had just stepped into it. Days blurred into nights, weeks into months. I became sharper, stronger. I learned the hierarchy of the ranch, the politics between women, the expectations of management. I discovered that some men came not for release, but for therapy, the kind of therapy no counselor could provide. Others came with darker energy, testing boundaries, forcing me to stand my ground. I learned to say no, and to mean it. But it wasn't just survival. There were moments of laughter, sisterhood, shared meals in the kitchen at 3 a.m. We were a strange family, bonded by circumstance, divided by ambition. Some women saw it as a stepping stone. Others saw it as a career. For me, it was education. A crash course in humanity. There was glamour, yes. Expensive gifts, high rollers, VIP rooms lit with golden chandeliers. But there was also exhaustion. Long nights that blurred into dawn, and moments where I stared at myself in the mirror, wondering who I was becoming. And yet, part of me felt powerful. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just reacting to the world. I was shaping it. I had turned curiosity into opportunity, risk into survival. The BunnyRanch didn't just change me. It carved out a version of me I didn't know existed. A version that could stand tall in a lineup, smile through fear, negotiate with confidence, and walk away richer than I'd ever been before. Looking back, that chapter was both a blessing and a burden. It taught me that every choice carries a price. And once you learn what you're worth in a world that thrives on desire and secrecy, you can never see yourself the same way again.
After months at the BunnyRanch, I realized I had learned everything I could there. It was a school of sorts, but one that came with strict rules and heavy costs. The house took half of what I earned. The schedules were grueling, the lineup bells relentless. I felt caged inside a world that was supposed to symbolize freedom. So I left. I packed my suitcase once again and stepped into the unknown.
For the first time, I decided to work independently. No ranch, no management, no lineups. Just me, my instincts, and the connections I had made. That move changed everything. Suddenly, I was in control, not only of my time, but of my brand. I chose where to meet clients, how to set my rates, and who I would or wouldn't see. I bought new clothes, invested in photography, learned how to present myself not just as an escort, but as an experience. The money multiplied. No more splitting with a house. What once felt like a fortune now doubled, tripled. I found myself in hotel suites with city views, sipping champagne I once couldn't pronounce, slipping into heels that cost more than my rent had been back in Paris. But with freedom came new challenges. There were risks, always. Screening clients, trusting instincts, saying no when something felt off. I learned to read people quickly, to sense danger in a glance, in a tone of voice. I became cautious, but not paranoid, strong, but not hardened. And then came the emotional toll. Because no matter how polished you make the surface, the work has weight. You listen to confessions, carry secrets, absorb pain. Men told me things they'd never told their wives, their friends, their therapists. They wept, they raged, they begged for connection. And I, Vivienne, carried all of it inside me. Sometimes I left a hotel suite with cash in my purse and a heaviness in my chest. The paradox of this life is that you're both empowered and consumed by it. You set boundaries, but the work seeps into your soul. You begin to wonder if people see you anymore, or only what you provide. Still, I kept going. I told myself it was temporary, a phase, a bridge to something better. But deep down, I knew I was building something permanent. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was creating a persona, a brand, a life on my own terms. Independence was intoxicating. No bells, no bosses, just Vivienne, on her own stage, rewriting her own rules. But independence is also lonely. There's no sisterhood in the kitchen at 3 a.m., no one to share a cigarette with after a long night. Just you, your thoughts, and the silence of a hotel room after the door clicks shut. And in those silences, I started to ask myself the hardest questions. Who am I when the makeup comes off? What happens when the calls stop? What's left when Vivienne isn't needed anymore? I didn't have the answers then. I only knew that the path I'd chosen was mine, and mine alone. And once you taste freedom, you can never go back to being owned. With independence came a new identity. I wasn't just an escort anymore. I was Vivienne, the woman who had built herself from contradictions. The restless girl from Paris, the curious teenager in Santa Cruz, the student of the ranch, and now the architect of her own life. All those versions lived inside me, and together they formed the woman I had become. Money no longer shocked me. It flowed in, sometimes in waves, sometimes in trickles, depending on how much effort I put into the business. I learned to treat it like any entrepreneur would. Track expenses, reinvest, market myself. I wasn't just selling time, I was selling trust, secrecy, the ability to make someone feel seen. But what I valued most wasn't the money, it was the control. For so long, I had felt like life was choosing for me. My parents' comparisons, my father's disappearances, my mother's decisions, my sister's shadow. The men at the ranch pointing their fingers in lineups. Now, for the first time, I was the one pointing. I was the one deciding. Of course, there were still risks. There were moments I felt unsafe, times I walked away shaken. There were nights I cried, wondering if I had lost myself. But there were also mornings when I woke up in a sunlit room, coffee in hand, proud that I had carved a path that was mine. Over time, I began to see patterns. The men I met weren't monsters or saviors, they were simply human, flawed and searching. Some wanted escape, others wanted healing, others just wanted someone to look at them without judgment. And in giving them that, I discovered something about myself. I had a gift for listening, for holding space, for turning pain into connection. People think this line of work is only about the body, but for me, it was about stories. Every man carried one, and in listening to them, I started to make sense of my own. Eventually, I stopped hiding from the word. I stopped saying, "This isn't who I am," and started saying, "This is part of who I am." Because denying it didn't erase it, it only gave it more power. By accepting Vivienne, I freed Francesca too. And here's the truth I carry now. Life doesn't move in straight lines. It zigzags, it detours, it crashes, it rebuilds. You don't always get to choose the doors that open in front of you, but you do get to choose whether to step through. And if you do, you have to live with what you find on the other side. I stepped through. I lived it. And though it wasn't always easy, it made me into the woman I am today. Stronger, wiser, unapologetic. People ask if I regret it. My answer is complicated. I regret the pain, the danger, the loneliness. But I don't regret the lessons. I don't regret learning how strong I could be. I don't regret discovering that even in the darkest rooms, you can still find your own light. So who am I now? I'm Vivienne. Not a victim. Not a stereotype. Not a secret to be hidden. A woman who survived, who adapted, who learned. And if my story helps even one person see that their past doesn't define their future, then every risk, every scar, every chapter was worth it. Because survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about learning to live fully, fiercely, freely.